when we start putting together plans that have deferred compensation component in that, that's what we're trying to look at from like a projection standpoint, is like, how does this work not only on the tax savings today and in retirement, but playing the tax bracket game later on into the future.
Another way of saying it, we're making a guess. Hey, Nick.
Scott, how you doing?
I'm great, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I got the running bug. So it's, we're recording this sometime in January, probably release in February. And, the New Year's resolution, it's still alive and well. We're going strong, a couple weeks in.
Awesome. Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
One of the things we were talking just before the recording was just about things that we were working on with clients.
Yeah.
And something that you and I both been working on with clients, especially those in kind of that executive space in tech, biotech, is do I or do I not use this? What is this deferred comp thing? And should I use it? Kind of the considerations there.
Yeah. It gets overlooked a lot of times, where it could just be just another fringe benefit, just another thing in the HR packet to go through. And what is this? I have a retirement account already. Maybe I have RSUs, ESPP, like all those different things. Like, what is deferred comp? Is it another retirement account? And so we'll dive through that in today's episode.
Absolutely. Kind of the framework that we would think of for, does it make sense to, warrant a deeper dive on, is this right for you? I think, first things first, I think it's just big picture.
Like, what is it? Yeah.
A deferred compensation plan is a non-qualified defined contribution plan, which is a fancy way of saying it's money that you put away that technically is like not secured when you put it away. That's one of the reasons why you're able to go defer this income. It's not like your traditional 401k where you go put away that $23,500 with the catch up. That's all protected, and there's all kinds of protections to make sure that money doesn't get turned away. When you go put money in a non-qualified defined contribution plan, or what we just call deferred comp plan, that money is really on the balance sheet of your company. So the strength of your company's balance sheet and its ability to stay in business is a big part of whether or not you should make contributions to this plan.
Yeah. And, I like to break things down and say, like, hey, let's look at the name, the title, the convention of it. Deferred compensation, and it's non-qualified. So when we just look at that batch of words, well, we're choosing intentionally to defer our compensation, saying, hey, we don't want to receive that today. Maybe we're making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 or north of that. And our budget and our cash flow, which we'll get into, is probably already good. And so we're saying, rather than choosing to take it this year as income, we're going to defer it till later, right? And then that word non-qualified, well, it just simply means, to your point, we're not going to get all of the tax benefits. There's still going to be some, but because it doesn't follow the letter of the law for the IRS in so many ways, then there's not as many rules and regulations and red tapes that we have to follow, right? Because with our 401k and some of the other qualified plans, we can only put in a certain amount, right? Per the IRS sanctions, right? And so non-qualified, meaning it doesn't quite follow, that letter of the law. So we have different rules and regulations around it.
Yeah. The other thing I would add, just big picture, this does allow you to, of course, put away a lot more in a year than you get to put in through just your 401k. So that one of the biggest benefits is, what we see often is you have someone who's making, $300,000, $400,000 a year in salary. They have another $300,000 to $400,000 a year of restricted stock units, and they just have, or more, right? And they just have more income every year than they need. But if you live here in California, you're quickly in the 37% tax bracket federally, and then you're easily in the 10% or higher tax bracket in the state. So you're getting to a point where you're paying almost 50 cents on the dollar for every additional dollar of income that comes through that RSU vest or that bonus. And so one of the things that you can do if deferred comp exists is you can choose to say, hey, I'm going to take a percentage of my salary, maybe it's 10, 20%, and some percentage of your bonus income, and you can defer that income. You're not allowed to defer RSU vesting. So, but a way to think of it is, it's just a cash flow game. So we just simply go, hey, how much cash flow, Nick, do you need every year? great. We're going to use, of your 400,000 of RSUs, we're going to use all of that for your living expenses. And we're going to start deferring a lot of your salary and your bonus to the deferred comp. So you don't pay 50 cents on the dollar right now. You wait until sometime in the future. And then in the future, you normally get to choose at a retirement date, for a certain number of years, starting at a specific age. There's lots of different rules you can look at for when you get the payment to come out, or you could take it as one big lump sum. Probably not the best way to do it, but you can. You can take all that money out, hopefully when you're in a lower tax bracket, and then you don't have to pay as much in taxes.
That's the name of the game right there. And so it's, how do we know our benefits? Where are we going to be income-wise this year? And, if we have above and beyond still left over, we're saying, do we want to pay taxes this year at it? Like to your point, 45, 50%, or do we want to defer it till later where we're presumably going to be in a much lower tax bracket? And again, where we have control over that. We could start to forecast, hey, 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, here's where I think my tax brackets are going to be based off of information that I have today. So when we start to look apples to apples and we run our today's tax brackets versus tomorrow's, we look at what's the difference? What's the delta or the tax arbitrage there of how much we're choosing to defer and save on taxes? So,
absolutely. And then, the way that we've often thought about it with clients is really two different ways. Oftentimes people, when they're at a company like, a big tech company or a big biotech company, if they really love the company they're at and they don't want to leave, they have no intention of leaving, lovely to stay here. If they want to get to a point where work's optional and then be done, we might want to turn it on, set up the plan so that the moment they retire, they're going to get an installment, a number of years of cash flow. And what are you basically doing? You're basically saying like, hey, I'm making $1 million a year right now, but I really only need, 200,000 from the investments or of income once I retire. So I'm just going to set it up so I start building a big pile of cash. Let's say I'm going to build $1 million deferred comp plan that's going to pay off 5 years the moment I retire. So I'm going to get 200,000 every year for 5 years. And so I just build it in that manner. And that maybe helps fund the initial part of retirement. That's one way you could do it. The other way I see folks doing it, I'm happy to hear what you have to say on this too, Nick, is they'll go, I don't need this for like forever. So I'm just going to defer it until a specified age. And they make that age fairly old. So now they get to let it go grow inside this deferred comp plan until they reach that specific age. And then they turn on that installment stream. And by doing that, that frees up more, gives you more space in these gap years of retirement for things like Roth conversions and things like that.
Yeah, we look at it as a giant puzzle, right? So we do the best we can figuring out where do we think we're going to be next year, 5 years, 10 years down the road. And we're looking at all of our different investment buckets. How much do we have in a brokerage account that's taxed at capital gains? How much do we have in a Roth, our 401k, those types of things? And so when we're trying to figure out the plan design, right? You said installment payments. I look at it as, I have a lot of clients at our firm that have pensions and we're figuring out, well, do we take it over 5 years at a certain age? Similar situation here, right? We usually don't want to err on the side of like the lump sum because it's going to be a big check. That's all going to be ordinary income. Don't want that. But looking at the plan design, figuring out what's our income going to be in retirement and how do we want to fill that up? Maybe it's going to be a combination of that ordinary income from the deferred compensation plan on top of some cash, on top of some capital gains. And really now, if we do the hard work of leaning into the plan, rolling up our sleeves, we can start to figure out what tax bracket we're going to be in based off of today. Of course, we always say, tax legislation and pencil, but we generally have a good idea of, okay, if I take this much and stretch it out over 10 years or 15 years, this is going to give me this much. And then if that's still short, well, I could take some from cash from my brokerage account and we have a little more control. And so when we start putting together plans that have deferred compensation component in that, that's what we're trying to look at from like a projection standpoint is like, how does this work not only on the tax savings today and in retirement, but playing the tax bracket game later on into the future.
Another way of saying it, we're making a guess. Yep. We're making a guess about tax arbitrage. And we're thinking that if we defer this income, you're going to be better off by doing so. And it is a guess. No one knows what future tax rates will be. That's why you just said they're written in pencil. But to your point, This plan is usually a good plan for people who are not tight on liquidity, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have tight cash flow, just move on to the next episode. Not for you. Obviously, you have to be able to participate in this, which usually means you're in the upper echelons of a company with upper echelons of income, so that it's something that's given to you as a benefit. The moment that happens, you do want to see what the credit quality of your employer is,
Right.
because this is money that you do put away. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not yours technically. It's technically yours, but it's also not yours. It's in what we call a RABI trust. It's created in a manner that allows it to have these tax benefits without it being flowing through the traditional system that already exists. It's kind of off to the side. But because of that, while it's on running through this program, it's really open to the creditors of the employer. So if they were to not be able to pay bills, they could go utilize these assets. So you want to make sure your employer has strong credit quality and isn't going to go down. The next thing is, you kind of mentioned it before, what's the plan design? And is it flexible?
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes plans will say things like, if you leave the company, you have to take your deferred comp as a lump sum. Well, that could be not very cool, right? I mean, it wouldn't necessarily hurt you if you're already in the highest tax bracket. You basically just don't get to do the arbitrage that you were trying to do in that instance. If you're already in the 37% bracket and you're already in the highest income bracket in your state, it doesn't really change much for you, but it does make it so you have this huge windfall that you have to go do something else with. Hopefully they make it so that when you leave and separate, you can keep that, much the way you get to keep your old 401k in that echelon as well, right? And you get to choose to move it when you want to.
Right. And so being able to really dig in and understand the plan design is crucial, right? We want to make sure, hey, if there's any triggers, or if we're moving companies, or we get an offer somewhere else, what does that plan say? It's better to understand that before you get started, to be able to be aware of what those things would be. And then to your point, right, we talked earlier about understanding why it's non-qualified and some of the benefits that come with that. We could put more money in, but now we're subject to employer credit risk. It's not really our asset. It's written on the balance sheet, this is reserved for us, but if our employer runs into any trouble, well, that may be one of the first things to go. And so being able to understand, like, what's the solvency of our company? Is it a good company? How well ran is it going to be? Those types of things. And so if you're working at a major tech company, probably better off than just a startup. And so, one of the other things that we look at, we talked a little bit about plan design, but is what can you invest it in?
Mm-hmm.
So many clients come to us with over concentration in their company stock through RSUs and employer shares and things like that. And sometimes we've seen in going through these deferred compensation, you have to invest in the employer stock. And so we're creating more of a problem, right? We're over concentrated. And so understanding what that menu looks like, some of those bigger companies do have the availability to invest in index funds and almost match what your plan lineup looks like within your 401k. But that's
what I've seen in the plans that I've helped out with. It almost exactly matches your 401k options. So it's pretty soup to nuts, understandable for the average person, which is nice. I think another thing to think about is just that I would want to think about if I were in your shoes is understanding, and it really does come down to understanding the plan specifically, but it's how does the plan interact with my other benefits at work? So I can think of one client of ours who has a deferred comp plan, but before they get to use the deferred comp plan, they have to fill up their 401k contribution that's normal. And all of that after-tax contribution that we'll sometimes have talked about, a mega backdoor Roth in the past, you have to fill up all that money to $70,000 plus before you turn on deferred comp. And yet I have other clients who are at different firms where they get to do traditional 401k and turn on deferred comp immediately.
Mm-hmm.
They'll also have things like you have to make your choice about salary and bonus all on the same deadline, which is usually before the beginning of the year. And then yet I know others where you have to do salary before the beginning of the year, but bonuses are before July. So it's just know that it's all different and you want to know the details of your plan.
Absolutely. And being able to understand those subtle nuances, whether it's, 70% of this or 90% of that, or when you're eligible or what calendar month you become eligible, those types of things, knowing the details and being able to, whether it's sit down with your financial planner or really read through the benefits, creating that space to map out what that's going to look like. It goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of this episode. Cash flow before anything else has to be number one on that. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And so
absolutely,
if you're in a situation where after maxing all these things out, you still have things left to be able to save into, then we start to look at that. Okay, how, if we're going to defer $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 that otherwise would have been income coming to us, what are the sources that we're going to pull from, whether it is a brokerage account, cash savings, or we just have enough in our normal paycheck to get by. But we got to figure out what that is first and how that works before we dive into it.
Yeah. And I would just add, where it gets exciting is, usually you're building this for the moment retirement happens or later in retirement. But if you have, let's say you want to retire when you're younger, and you're still going to have kids in college. Well, you can utilize this to build it out so that this cash flow can be helping fund the kids in college and the lower tax brackets, right? Or you want to go finish paying off the mortgage or get the mountain house or whatever it is. Like, you can really utilize this from a cash flow standpoint to help do that in a manner that hopefully helps you with that tax arbitrage. Just keep a little bit of that more of that money in your own pocket. I guess I would just briefly touch on the red flags. If there's that forced lump sum payout at separation or like a change of control, I'd really think twice about it.
Yeah.
And although a part of me is like, if I'm already in the highest tax brackets, I'm still just rolling the dice and
you're going to pay the taxes either way. So.
It doesn't hurt you as much as it kind of sounds like it hurts you. But if your employer has weak credit or doesn't have good trust protections and isn't set up for ongoing success, I would just say no thank you to a deferred comp plan.
I'll take the taxes now. Yeah.
Poor investment choices aren't something that we see so often in larger corporations now. Their 401ks and their deferred comp plans usually have solid choices with minimal fees, so you're probably good there. But do double check it. And then another one would be, we didn't talk about it too deeply, but once you set up your choice, you don't just get to go in and change it all the time. Some plans are designed so once you set it, you don't get to change it at all.
And when you say set it, are you referring to when you receive the money one day, like the installment?
Thank you. So I'm going to receive it at retirement for 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, or I'm going to receive it at 50. Maybe you decide, you know what, no matter what, Nick, I am done working at 50. You can't make me work longer. And then you turn, 47 and you're like, oh man, there's this new project coming on at work that I'm so excited about, but it's going to take 7 years to get through.
Yeah.
I'm going to go until I'm 55. Well, you want to be able to re-defer, and re-defer is usually allowed. The rule roughly, don't quote me exactly on it, but it's something like, so long as you change the deferral to 5 years longer than when you originally intended, you're usually okay to go. There's more stipulations to it than that. We're obviously not giving you every detail that's in a plan document on a very brief podcast, but just keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, you just want to know what you're getting yourself into. And if you have questions, whether it's throwing it into AI, meeting with an advisor, your HR, understanding just all the nuance that comes with it, because there's red tape involved. And so being able to understand hey, is this what it says it is? Understanding the red flags, things to look out for, those types of things. So
I think the simplest is just that, if you think you're going to be leaving soon, just don't do it. There's too much complexity in what this thing is to bring on that for yourself. So
right.
If you plan on being somewhere for a number of years ahead, you really love where you're at, go for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's kind of a good overview for the day. Anything else you'd like to add, sir?
Nope. Simplicity wins a lot of times. And so the tax savings is significant. Sit down and be able to look at, hey, pay taxes today versus later. But again, cash flow has to work. Our eventual retirement date can't be too close to when we want to start this. But again, don't let complexity get in the way of simple. So
absolutely. All right. Well, until next time.
All right. See you, Scott.
See ya.